Welcome to the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. I'm Catherine Tomlinson and I founded an eco-conscious pottery company called Oxford Clay. Now, I don't just make pottery, I make resources such as books and courses for other potters who want to be more eco-conscious in their pottery practice. And that's what this podcast is all about. It's about me sharing everything I've learned with you, and I can't wait to get started. Let's go! Hello, so before we get on with the episode, I wanted to tell you about two completely free guides that I've made just for you about pottery. And the first guide is called How to Make a Pottery Glaze. So if you've ever been curious about how to make your own pottery glaze, this guide will show you exactly how to make your own glaze from start to finish. It tells you all the ingredients you need. It tells you step by step how to make the glaze, how to stay safe when glaze making, and it's got a Stoneware glaze recipe in there. And if you've been curious about how to fire pottery, I have also made a guide on electric kiln firing. So this guide will tell you all the different terms that's used in like kiln firing, and what they mean, and it also takes you through the exact firing schedule that I use to do my bisque firing and also Stoneware glaze firing. So it's got all the temperatures in there, all the timings in there, and both of these guides are available from the Oxford Clay website at www.oxfordclay.co.uk/resources for potters. Okay, let's get on with the episode. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. I'm Catherine Tomlinson and thank you so much for joining me for this episode. It's going to be an episode where I'm going to tell you about some really cool experiments that I've just done with verdigris and adding verdigris to glaze. So for quite a long time now, I've been using verdigris in my pottery, but what I've been doing is mixing with a little bit of water and sometimes a little bit of glaze and just painting that on top of my pottery like I would, with other metal oxides. But what I've been doing recently is seeing whether you can add verdigris to glazes and what happens to the glaze and whether, what colours it makes, and yeah, it's been really, really cool. So I thought, let me share my experiments with you so you can actually see what kind of glazes you can make with verdigris. So if you're joining for this episode and you're not sure what verdigris is, I thought I'd maybe just tell you a little bit about it at the beginning, just to contextualize this episode for you. So verdigris is a form of copper oxide. So you find it basically on, say, if you think of any kind of copper roof, that's oxidized in the atmosphere, goes that lovely, beautiful kind of bluey green color. That top layer of the oxidized copper is verdigris. So what you can actually do is artificially oxidize copper and make your own verdigris. So I make mine with electrical wire, which is like a lovely pure form of copper, and I artificially oxidize it with vinegar and salt, and it makes verdigris. It makes this verdigris powder. So I'm just gonna get the powder just to show you if you're knock the microphone, if you're watching on the video, there's the verdigris powder. It's this kind of beautiful kind of bright green powder. So it's not like a normal copper oxide, which is like a kind of much darker colour, and it's actually like a proper green colour. So hopefully that's described it for you enough on the podcast. If you imagine like a bright green powder, that's verdigris. So the colour you'd see it on a roof, on like a building roof that's got the copper, or a statue, or sometimes you get them on letterboxes, don't you? You see that beautiful kind of you often get it on brass as well, so a brass statue. You'll see that verdigris just kind of forming on the outside, and it's that kind of colour. That's the colour you're getting that's the colour getting when you make the verdigris powder. So you do need quite a lot of wire to make verdigris, as in like, you know, to make quite a large quantity for actually putting in glazes. So I actually, so I know that verdigris is quite a weak colourant. So because I wanted to test the verdigris in a glaze at quite high concentrations, I actually had to make quite a lot of the verdigris beforehand. So I basically took loads and loads of copper wire, took all the casings off, and then like made a big kind of ball of copper wire, and then like sprayed it with salt and vinegar, you know, left it for a few days, crumbled it off, repeated the process, crumbled off the verdigris, repeated the process, and yeah, so it did take me quite a long time to make enough verdigris to put into these glaze tests, because I've used so much. So some of the glaze tests I did were at 10% verdigris, which is very high, especially for a copper oxide, because copper's quite a strong colourant. You would never see it that high if you use like copper oxide or something. I mean, it can be added literally 0.5, 1%, you know, maybe 2% or something in a glaze. That would give a very strong colour. So using verdigris at 10%, that's really strong, and you know, with mixed results, I have to say. So I'm going to talk you through those in a minute. So and yeah, I also used the verdigris at 5%. So I did some tests at 10 and some tests at 5%. And then I had a base glaze every time. So I'll talk you through the base glazes as well in this podcast episode. So you just have the complete recipe, which is like, yeah, it's nice, isn't it? If you know exactly how people are making their stuff. And I do have a commitment to, like, you know, sharing everything I know with you and stuff. So yeah, I'm really like looking forward to telling you about it. Right, okay, so let's get on to the glaze tests. Right, let's pick the first test. Okay, so this glaze, I'm going to hold it up if you're watching on the video. If you're listening on the podcast, I'm going to just describe it to you. So it's a beautiful green glaze. If you imagine like it's like a kind of turquoisey green glaze. The actual glaze surface is shiny. The colour is even, but the actual colour is like a beautiful kind of like a deep sea turquoise, greeny blue. Oh, it's beautiful. So let me tell you about the recipe for that glaze. Okay, so I've spoken about this before on the podcast. Basically, I keep all my glaze recipes in one place, hopefully. So it just makes it so much easier for me to be able to like find recipes and like make sure like I know where they are and stuff. So I got my trusty notebook here, which has got all the recipes in, and I've highlighted them to try and make it a bit easier for me to find when I'm talking you through them just now. So okay, so right, this one, I'm going to read out the recipe to you, is 50% Cornish stone, so 50 parts Cornish stone, 25 parts quartz, 15 parts whiting, and 10 parts dolomite. So you can see that gives a kind of a shiny glaze with like a little bit of opacity to it. Opacity, if that's a word. It's ever so slightly opaque, which is kind of that's often made by sort of whiting and dolomite together, will give a kind of like ever so slightly kind of opaque kind of look to it. Okay, so then the verdigris was added on top of that recipe. The verdigris was added at 5%. So that's this recipe. And I really love that glaze. I think that's so beautiful. So I forgot to tell you, actually, the whole point of making verdigris, your own verdigris, is that you're not having to use like commercial metal oxide. So, you know, at the beginning when I was telling you, oh, you have to get loads of wire and like make it takes a while, I was like, why would anyone do that? What a palaver. But the really great thing about using verdigris is you're recycling metal. So you're recycling, you know, copper that's already in the supply chain. You're kind of almost like recycling it back into oxide, which is such a cool thing to do, because like, so I actually collect my wire from charity shops, and it's all the products, it's like electrical products and stuff that they can't sell because they failed the PAT test. And so I just, you know, I basically strip them back, get the wire, and then make the colourant from that. So it's so cool to be able to, like, you know, recycle metal. And it means that you're not having to use any of those supply chains, you know, for commercial metal oxides. Some of the supply chains can be very hard, you know, hard to trace, or they can maybe have artisanal mining in them, where people aren't sort of properly protected, you know, their health and safety is at risk. There might be children working in that sector. So it can be a really difficult thing to know if the commercial metal oxide you're using, you know, where it comes from, how it's been mined, who's mined it, how it's been, you know, how it's been, I just said that, how it's been mined. But like, it can be, it's just so nice to know that, like, you know your copper, it's already there in the supply chain, you can recycle it back into an oxide. So that's why I do it with verdigris. That's why I colour my pottery with verdigris. If you're interested to know how to make copper and iron oxides from recycled metal, I have a course on the Oxford Clay website. It's like a video course. So and then you also have like a booklet, and you go through the booklet and it shows you exactly how to do it, shows you how to apply it to pottery as well. What it doesn't show you is how to actually add it into your glaze. So if you were going to make a coloured glaze like this, you know, green coloured glaze, but you can, it's basically the same process. You make the verdigris and then you just add it as a powder at, like, you know, 5%, like we've just spoken about. It's showing you how to paint that oxide onto your pottery. So it's also, if you also want a video course, but you want to read about it in a book, it's also in eco-conscious pottery glazing. Make your own pottery glazes with minimal harm to animals, humans and the environment. It's also in that book as well, which you can get from the Oxford Clay website, and the course is on there too, or you can go to Amazon and get a paper copy of the book. Right, okay, so let's move on to the next glaze test. Okay, we're going to do the next glaze test, and this one, so this glaze test is kind of, this is quite interesting to show you actually, because basically it's got like little patches of white in it, but the base glaze is a kind of beautiful sage colour, and the glaze is slightly matte. So it's like kind of some parts of the glaze are kind of shiny, but it's got that very slight kind of matte finish to it. And it's got these little white bits in it, and that is actually not a natural feature of the glaze. That is because I didn't mix the glaze ingredients together properly. So don't do that. When you make this glaze, if you make this glaze yourself, this beautiful kind of slightly matte sage green glaze yourself, if you just mix it properly, you won't get these like little sort of specks of white, which is probably, you know, it's one of the ingredients, basically the rocks that I didn't quite properly mix. So sometimes when you're making like a bajillion different glaze tests, sometimes it's quite, you know, it's quite hard to like ensure they're all really, really thoroughly mixed and sieved and blah. If you're making like a big vat of this, you know, glazing all your work in it or something, then you would mix it properly, you would sieve it. It's a really good idea to sieve glazes if you've put any kind of oxide in them, colouring oxide, because it really helps to disperse it throughout the glaze. So note to self, sieve your glaze a little bit better next time. So, okay, so this one, looking through my trusty notebook. Okay, so this one, it's like a kind of lovely sage colour, and it's made from 40% Cornish Stone, 20% Quartz, 15% China clay, 10% whiting and 10% Dolomite. Oh, just realised I was holding it up there, just like trying to get it in the right place. Okay, and then it's 5% verdigris. So that one there, so really, really interesting, because the other one that we just spoke about was 5%, and that was a real turquoise colour. This one's 5%, and it's a kind of much more sage, kind of really muted, beautiful green colour. Oh, I love that one. I really love the colour of that one. It's a very light green. It's got a very like lovely calming kind of colour, you know. Okay, let's go on to the final glaze, which looks really nice from the tests. And again, this one is a kind of more like a bright green colour. So it's a kind of, I would say this is a kind of very traditional green colour. Not like a bright grassy green, but so it's kind of like if someone said like, imagine the colour green, it would be like that. But not turquoisey, and not a kind of so it doesn't look very blue. It's got a kind of like, I don't know how you'd say it. It's slightly sort of dark, like a sort of slightly darker green, but it's not like a sage green. I would call this the kind of proper sort of green, like a forest, maybe like a forest green, but a little bit lighter, like a light forest green. Yeah, this is interesting, just trying to describe colours, because everyone has a different understanding of what like forest green is or what different colours are. So like if you're interested in actually seeing all these, you can look on the, if you're listening on the podcast, you can have a look on the YouTube video, and you can see, yeah, I'll link it actually in the podcast show notes, so you can actually just see a video of them and what they look like if you're interested in like making all of these, or one of them, or none of them, just having a look at them. Okay, this one, the recipe for this one is Feldspar 56% or parts, Quartz 22 parts, whiting 13 parts, and plant ash. So for this I used hardwood ash, 9%, 9 parts, and then this was verdigris at 5%. So you can see it's actually pretty dark colour with 5% verdigris. So it's just so interesting, I think, how verdigris works in different recipes, you know, and sometimes it's very dark and sometimes it's less dark, and you know, it's so interesting. So I think it's really, that's why you just have to experiment all the time in pottery, you know, like you just have to, you know, keep on trying different stuff and, you know, experimenting in like one recipe with a certain oxide, or, you know, so yeah, that's why I wanted to share these with you, because it can be like quite a long, laborious process, sort of like trying to like uncover, you know, good recipes, like, you know, yourself and stuff. So for like, I just share them with you here, and then you know, you've got them, and then you can use them. Right, okay, and I want to just, lastly, I just wanted to talk to you about one of them that didn't work. So I actually tested 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, I actually tested 8 testers this time, with the verdigris at 5 and 10%. And the other ones that I haven't shown you on this episode, they actually had this glaze fault. So I'm just going to read a bit more about glaze fault. So just reading this out of the New Ceramics Colouring Glazes book by Linda Bloomfield. And Linda Bloomfield at the very end talks about sort of like glaze faults and how to correct them and stuff. And there's this glaze fault called crawling. So I'm just holding the pot up now, and it's got, so crawling, if I was to describe it, is basically when the glaze almost like goes into sort of droplets on the clay. So almost, you can see it's like kind of separated from the clay, and the glaze has gone into, you know, areas where you've got glaze, and then you've got areas of sort of like bare clay. And it's a very random effect. It's kind of just basically gone into droplets. And Linda Bloomfield actually says that this can be as a result of like if your pottery is like dusty, if you're trying to glaze it and it's dusty. But because this happened with pretty much all of the ones that I tested, even ones that I'd only just fired and then tested, you know, I'd bisque fired and then tested, I think it's the glaze rather than the dusty pottery, which is the problem here. So so this recipe, if you're interested, I mean, if you like this effect, you know, you're making like an amphibian or something, sculpture of an amphibian, and you think that would be great for my amphibian skin, the fact that it's gone all kind of like little like blotches. I will read out the recipe for this one, but I just put it in the category of like probably not one that, you know, probably not one to try again or something, or like doesn't work or whatever. So this one is 40% Cornish Stone, 40% plant ash, and 20% quartz, and then it was 10% verdigris. So that is, yeah, that is like a lot of verdigris. You can see the plant ash, I hope you can see this, is basically the plant ash has done a kind of, it's made this beautiful kind of like almost like a bluey white cloud kind of on the top of the green. It looks so beautiful, you know, a bit like you'd have in a rutile glaze, and it looks so nice. So that is from the plant ash. You often get that effect when you use like wood ash in a glaze. It's a bit, you know, a bit like a rutile sort of thing. Yeah, okay, so, right, okay, note to self, I will put all these recipes into the show notes, and yeah, in the podcast I will also link to the YouTube video if you want to have a look at how the glazes look. Yeah, so it's been really nice like sharing these experiments with you. I love experimenting with glazes. Yeah, it's just so cool. I'll still go through a flurry of kind of through a flurry. That's actually quite hard to say. Through a flurry of kind of testing like different ones, and then I will just kind of then go through a bit where I just sort of more like mulling over ideas, and then I'll go through another flurry of like, you know, testing different plants, or like testing different ashes, you know, like plant ashes, or, you know, testing different things I think might colour a glaze. And yeah, it's really cool. I really love it. So and I really love sharing it with you, so thank you so much for joining me for this episode. It's been brilliant to talk to you about. So yeah, and until the next episode, wishing you very happy potting, and I will see you soon on the next episode. Okay, bye. Thank you so much for joining me for the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. If you're interested in learning more about Oxford Clay or eco-conscious pottery, there's so much for you on the Oxford Clay website. There's books, e-courses, there's a blog on there, loads of other podcast episodes, and I can't wait to share it with you. The web address is oxfordclay.co.uk. I'll see you over there.